Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is Stephen Scoggins, speaking on solutions for dealing with bullying and the stress it causes, including ways to heal from bullying. Stephen Scoggins was raised just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. While he was 17 years old, his father couldn't find work, and Stephen dropped out of school to help provide for his brother and his father by paying the utilities and purchasing a family car. After 8 months of preparation training for the military, Stephen was told that his GED scores weren't high enough and that he also had a slight curvature in the top of his spine. For these reasons, he could not be admitted into the Navy as a SEAL. He wandered aimlessly out of the MEPS office that evening and found himself sitting atop the overpass of an 8-lane highway, not thinking about any of his relationships or the ways in which God had blessed him, only contemplating which one of the vehicles whirring beneath him would finish the job. The commotion of the day was silenced, and Stephen's thoughts turned to the loved ones that he would leave behind. Something was urging him, pushing him, not off the overpass, but back into the relationships that gave his life meaning. Stephen did not leap from the bridge that night. The voice that called him down would be the same voice that later called him to start Custom Home Exteriors. From being homeless, broke, and sleeping in his car, he started a company that is currently worth $36 million just 16 years later. Stephen now teaches that there is always wealth hidden in the debris of life. His commitment to striving for a healthy mind, heart, and business has allowed him to build his flagship business and mentor others in the ways of biblical principles and a life of faith. Although Stephen has found favor with a continually growing business, he believes that his true calling is mentoring others on how to move beyond their circumstances to find not only success, but hope, faith, and happiness. Stephen now tours the country speaking to thousands, and he shares his personal story and all that he has learned about anxiety, depression, guilt, forgiveness, fear of failure, fear of success, and more in his latest book, The Journey Principles. Stephen, we are so happy to have you here. Welcome, audience.
Thank you so much, guys. That's awesome. The nice bio. You guys did a fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and it's your story. It's a fantastic story.
We're so happy you could be on the show with us today. And audience, you are in for a real treat today. Stephen, what led you to the work that you are currently doing?
In one word, you. What led me to what I'm doing right now is a result of the person that's probably listening to this, or the person that will read, or the person that wants to grow and get past anxiety, fear, depression, things of that nature. These are all, struggle standpoints in my life, and even overcoming bullying, things of that nature. Everything we do now at the Journey Principles Institute is about the person. It's about growing people and helping them learn from one another and using their testimonies as things to actually propel them forward and never leave them behind.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much, Stephen. As we prepared for this, we see how much you've faced through the years. Stephen, in terms of our topic today on bullying, can you describe for our audience the types of stress and anxiety an individual being bullied experiences and how that stress affects their behavior and thinking?
Well, have you ever had an instance where you lashed out by accident due to stress of the day, concern, or maybe just because you didn't feel like you're your best that day, like your self-esteem is kind of taking a toll?
Yes.
Well, bullying as a whole is very similar. It's an outside action of an inside issue. In short, Will Bowen said, hurt people hurt people. And so by definition, bullies are actually hurting people that are hurting people. They tend to be, this tends to come from an enormous feeling of low self-worth. As a result of a bully is trying to find significance, therefore they're projecting their self above another. They're trying to make themselves feel better about themselves, unfortunately through the hurting or the distancing of others. They don't fully understand what they're doing to get started. And all it takes is one laugh for somebody to laugh as they're kind of working with somebody else. Meaning that they've done something that's going to injure someone, and their counterpart laughs, and all of a sudden their self-esteem is now affirmed. So that typically, it seems to be where it seems to start. At least it was in my life.
As you were answering, Stephen, the thought came to my mind that there are two responses when you say hurt people hurt people. I think that is very true. Most of the times when people lash out, it's a lack that they're feeling in themselves that they express outwardly against someone else. But or maybe I'm jumping ahead here. This is what you found in your work. There's some people that even from their pain, they can be kind and compassionate. What accounts for that difference?
It accounts for perception. It's how they perceive their inadequate, natures about themselves. So one of the biggest switches I had in my life was actually learning that in order to become something that I felt like I needed to become, I had to reach and I had to grow. A lot of times it's easier not to grow and to just hurt others than it is to actually face our own fears and actually learn to grow. And I think that's probably the deciding factors, how you perceive your life and what you are to be and what you want to become. Are you willing to grow? Are you not willing to grow? It comes down to fear, fear of success, fear of failure. It's really about perception. And how do you change someone's perception? And typically I find that it's through knowledge.
That's excellent. I agree. And it does take courage to grow. Stephen, can you describe what are the types of stress and anxiety that someone is being bullied? What are they feeling, and what can you do to relieve that stress and just help them along as they experience this thing or before they can get out of it?
Well, not too long ago, I was blessed to have the opportunity to speak at a school in Savannah, Georgia. It's called Godly Station School. And one of the cool things that I shared with the students there that seemed to really resonate with them is actually helping them understand the bully. A lot of entities focus on the bullied, the person, dealing with the bullying, not realizing that that person might later become a bully themselves because they're now lashing out for previous hurts. So we actually spend a lot of time focusing on the bully and knowing about the bullies, the hurt people, about the hurt they feel, about the insignificance they feel, and things of that nature, and trying to address that. So, for example, have you ever been a place where you're thinking about or physically only to find out you're in danger? It's kind of a fear mentality.
Yeah.
So isolation is one of the greatest tragedies of that whole situation. From a bullied point of view, no one wants to be in danger. No one wants to constantly live in the flight or flight response. Staying in that space breeds more anxiety, more fear, and all at once. It kind of becomes overwhelming to the senses as a whole. So in order to feel safe, we seek isolation. And then we later feel guilty about being isolated. So it becomes like this repetitive thing. And all the while, the bullied or the bullies are actually getting a little bit stronger because they're getting to cower. So one of the things that, we try to work on specifically is releasing the fear and anxiety having to do with the being bullied by actually speaking what's happening, telling somebody what's going on, sharing that, writing down your stories, journaling, things of that nature. So it doesn't stay locked up in your feelings and in your mind, therefore it can't persecute you in your feelings and your mind. So you really fight several things. You fight anxiety, you fight fear, you fight isolation, you fight guilt, and you fight them all at the same time. What we don't understand is the bully and the bullied are oftentimes feeling the same thing. Most bullies feel guilty about bullying, but they get self-affirmation through their peers, which is why they continue to do it.
That's a very interesting statement, and I think that's something people don't hear often, from the perspective of the bullier, that the person who's doing the bullying has unmet needs and,
sure.
Certainly is speaking out. And I think from what we often see in the news, when someone's having a bad experience, the thing is to be silent and, to hide rather than, hey, stop that or tell someone.
Well, and unfortunately what happens is the greatest war someone fights is within themselves. They start fighting a battle inside themselves because they're not speaking out. The greatest way to get outside of fighting that battle inside yourself is to actually fight it on the outside, which requires us, sharing and talking, getting help for the bullying situation, reaching out and getting mentorship and knowledge, knowing that the bully is actually scared of that person's gifts and things that they bring to the table. It's intimidating to them. So
I think that's a scene we tend to see in the movies. When you meet a bully with support, the bully will pick on one person in isolation, but if there's a group supporting a person, the bully doesn't pick on that person.
Exactly.
That's very true. What I have found in other people, sometimes when I listen to conversations with my family or friends, there's this teasing. People will say, oh, I'm just kidding you. But to me, I don't know if I'm getting sensitive as I get on in years, that really seems to me, some of this teasing doesn't seem friendly. If I don't feel good, I can easily see that escalating into bullying. And they're newspaper reports in colleges, these hazing rituals and things that we ask people to do. It's a little more than a contest or a challenge. This, to me, seems mean-spirited, and as we've seen in the news, this is dangerous. This is bullying. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, we have to become okay with ourselves, so we stop seeking self-value outside ourselves. You know, a lot of that is spending time with yourself, meditating, praying, thinking, reading, growing, that kind of things. But I'll give you an example. So one of our Journey Principles Nation members, that's what we call the folks of the Journey Principles Nations. We have about 20,000 strong on Facebook. They're fantastic people. But one of our members, actually TJ, said in high school he was really good at ribbing others. And then he later told us in one of his coaching sessions he did not really want to, he didn't want others to know his truest form. So what he would do is, in order to to take the eyes off himself, he would put eyes on someone else, rather than picking on a large child or a large adult. He would say things about their weight or about acne or about numerous things, just so he didn't have to share himself with the world. So it's really hard, because it turns out that healthy ribbing and joking can be a very fine line, because it really becomes dangerous only when it raises another up, puts another down. So that's where it becomes, that's where you really kind of go from joking to ribbing to, is it constructive? And, the biggest way to do that is just say, hey, look, I was just kidding. Did that make you, how did that make you feel? If the person is honest and will share, hey, look, that didn't make me feel that great. That gives that person an opportunity to say, I'm sorry, one, that wasn't my intent. I was really poking fun. Please forgive me. And it gives it an opportunity for forgiveness to happen. So.
That's beautiful, and forgiveness is such a wonderful practice that I think all humans can really indulge in that more. Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Sure.
Great, Stephen. I want to jump in here. While I was listening, what it made me think of and remember was the Simpsons, the very popular Simpsons TV show, where they show many, many episodes of bullying. And, in fact, I can think of cases where Milhouse was bullied. I can't think of the other kid who gets bullied all the time. And then even Bart gets bullied by those three bad kids in the TV show. And then what I think you've touched on something really important here, where what you're saying is, in terms of the underlying causes of bullying, that the bully themselves, they are, you use the word in some way, intimidated, that they are running away from their own internal world. But I want to ask you this in terms of an underlying cause. In one of the Simpsons TV shows, they showed that the Springfield was under some kind of bubble, and they thought that they all were going to die, and that was going to be the end of the town. And so the guys who had normally bullied one of the kids, the tables get turned on the bully, where he picks up the stick and he starts to beat them, and he says, oh, because he had asked the question, why were you guys always bullying me? And then when he turns the table, he starts hitting them, and he says, oh, now I get it. He goes, this feels good, saying it felt good to hit them back. And so I was wondering about that aspect as an underlying cause. There seems to be something about for some people that they seem to get some kind of pleasure out of seeing people twist in the wind or experiencing pain or being humiliated or embarrassed. And then that it could be at any level. Right now I'm thinking of a math teacher that I had in high school, and he would literally, I had not thought of this as bullying before, but when he would pull pop quizzes on people, and you'd walk into the classroom and he'd say, okay, everyone put your books on your desk, and he said, we're going to have a quiz, and then he would give the quiz, and of course, anyone who had not done their homework, they would fail, and then the people who got the lowest grades, he would call them up, and he had used his red pencil, and he would call them up in front of the class and embarrass them, and when he handed them their paper. So now looking back, I could see in that situation, that was a situation where a student was being bullied by a teacher. That's very irregular, but what I'm saying is I remember that. And so as I learned more about the story of that teacher, I found that when he was unhappy, as you're saying, part of the bullying came from that. And then as he found love in his life and he became happier, he changed. And so I just want you to speak a little bit more about that underlying cause of the person who's doing the bullying, because in terms of what's going on in their mind, or at least what might be going on in their mind?
Well, I think it's two things. One, I feel like, because I've actually been a bully and a bullied. I started off being bullied first, and then found myself bullying a child one time, and found myself later asking for forgiveness of that same child within a few weeks later because I felt so bad about it. But one thing I think everyone that really struggles is two things: self-esteem and control. Typically, children that grow up in households that have a certain amount of chaos, a certain amount of uncertainty, a certain amount of things that, in the Journey Principles book, I'm very transparent about my personal journey with my parents and how chaotic that life was for a while. And one of the things that came of that is the need to control. So I found in my adulthood that at first I had a need to control things, even minor details, only because I didn't fully understand that I was trying to control things now because I couldn't control things then. So a lot of bullies are seeking ways to control. So they seek ways to control kids, adults, situation through lying, through deception, through physical means, and they spend a lot of time trying to control another one. And typically what will happen is you'll find out that not only is their self-esteem drastically low, but they also probably have zero control and probably have a lot of chaos in their personal lives, away from school, away from work, away from things of that nature. So they're what they've done is they're now trying to stabilize their own lives with the feeling and the need to control others, which is clearly not healthy. It's not going to help them, unfortunately, but they don't know that. It's an instinct. It's more of a sixth sense, if you must. That's something they're dealing with. On the self-esteem side, again, they haven't found out who they are as a person, and because of the chaotic life, they're still struggling to figure out who they are as a person. And so what they do is they look for ways to lash out. One of our former bullies said, "I just wanted others to like me. I did not feel very liked even in my own home." And that statement alone is powerful. And then he says, "I just needed an outlet to express my hurt feelings myself, and I began acting when I saw another laugh when I treated someone poorly." So they really got affirmed when they treated someone poorly. So therefore they got stuck. And they said, well, and then the other thing was, it was the only thing he says is it was the only self-esteem that he had positive reinforcement for. So the problem is, I would see, is the bully felt less, but bullied more to forget and move on and to control the original pain. So it's more about control. It's more about self-esteem. It's more about self-understanding. And if you could take a bullied child, for example, in that same school we did, I always do an exercise, which I actually tried to get, after the talks about three-quarters of the way through, I always try to get a bully to confess being a bully on stage and repent of it. And so far, I've had a 100% success rate with that, because what happens is the bully begins to identify with the control piece, with the self-esteem piece. And once they understand it, they make a change. That kid is no longer affecting the 6 other kids he was bullying. He actually went, and I got letters from the 6 kids he was bullying, and all of them said, yeah, he's actually turned into a good friend. And all because he understood himself.
Yeah, it's that great story. I just want to jump right on that, Stephen, because I am so happy that we're talking about this topic. It's the trending topic, and many people listening have, as you said, been on either side of the equation. Stephen, I just have to tell you, this is amazing that we're having this conversation. Almost everyone would know someone who has been bullied, even if they haven't been bullied themselves. So this is a very deep area that needs to be explored, and this is a wonderful thing that you're doing. When I scan my past, what occurs to me is that I feel very fortunate in that I basically only have 3 large looming bullying incidents that I can recall, 2 which were in elementary school when I was 10 or 11 years old, and 1 when I was in the 7th grade, so I guess I would have been 12 or 13 at that time. And I remember the one in junior high school was a very strong memory because it was during the first week of school, and when you're new in the 7th grade, the 9th grade is a loom very large. And so what I was thinking about was if you could tell our listeners, because this bullying issue is such a strong one, and also because it's very powerful, that it's not just that people have been bullied. We have also witnessed bullying incidents where perhaps we would be thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening to this person, and I'm so glad it's not me. And in my particular case, I can remember 2 or 3 incidents in junior high school in particular, which were very, very horrific bullying incidents. So with that in mind, could you give our listeners some practical tips for dealing with bullying because of the fear and anxiety that's involved with this, and importantly, the silence? I think a key thing is that the person who is being bullied as bully victim, or when they witness a situation, they may not tell anyone, let alone not tell their parents, but they may not even tell their siblings. So can you give some advice or practical tips for what a person could do, a child in elementary school or a child in junior high school or high school or even in the workplace? What can a person do? And specifically what I was thinking about in the school context, for example, a person who gets cornered by a group of 3 or 4 bullies, because sometimes it's not just one person, they come as a group, they corner the person and tell them, give me your lunch money, or we're taking their lunch, and that it's going on all the time, and they're not telling anyone, so they're not eating lunch or something like that. So they're not going home and telling their parents, so there's a continual fear. And even though I was bullied in those 3 incidents, it wasn't a continual thing. They were really spaced out, so I feel fortunate. So we would like our listeners to be fortunate too. So can you give some tips specifically addressing that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the primary, there are 5 really powerful ones that helped me and when I was kind of struggling through it. One, you need to communicate to the highest possible level you can about the bullying situation. So to see if there's a way to alleviate some of that stress and anxiety that comes along with that by eliminating the actions the bully can take. Now, the bully will make them believe that, hey, if you tell somebody, it's going to be worse. The reality is it'll actually prolong it. So, but I'd say communicating is probably step number 1. Make sure you're communicating to your parents or the parents. Make sure you're communicating to a spouse, a boss, or whatever's going on, to make sure you're communicating, hey, look, this is a challenge I have. This is what's going on. I need some help. And then let those institutions and parentals, parents and whatnot, actually dig in deep and see if they can get some help. The other thing is do something creative each day. Be physical, be creative, avoid isolation. Do whatever you can to get alone, to get from being alone in such a way as you don't want to respond to the world. Don't let the world dictate how well you are creative and how expressive you are in this world. Work towards becoming more creative. Work towards becoming more physical. Spend time with family and trusted friends who encourage you. Because if you have 1 or 2 bullies in your life and those people are telling you the voice of less kind of thing and speaking more on that realm, then you need double the amount of people speaking encouragement and life into your soul, telling you are worth it. You are worth something. You can be anything. And sometimes the bullying actually comes from a parent, which makes it that much more difficult. So that child may have to reach out to a parent. A friend's parent, and they have to reach out to a school, to a guidance counselor, things of that nature. And then I think one of the greatest things that comes up there is also see yourself not for who you are now, but who you'll become. Seek to always grow and understand. Understand that bullies are hurting people, and that allows you to give them a certain amount of grace and mercy and not take it quite so personal, that when you're going through things, you can actually see the pain. And lo and behold, at some point in time, they will also become the bullied, more likely than not. So it's a circular life philosophy. Jennifer Lawrence, one of the main actresses for the Hunger Games, was highly bullied. Jessica Alba, highly bullied. Justin Timberlake, highly bullied. Robert Pattinson of Twilight, highly bullied. They need to know that they're not alone. The bullying happens all over the place. It's not just happening to them, and they need to learn. If they know and if they gain understanding and gain perspective on these things, it'll actually help them heal.
Wow,
And the
I
other
had
thing
to tell you, Stephen, when you mentioned those famous celebrities, that sounds like a whole show or a book where people who are famous now, because they weren't always famous, that they could tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
that would help others.
Absolutely. And it started, most of them started by journaling and doing some of the things we're talking about.
Because I had not been aware that, when you mentioned Justin Timberlake, I said, oh, that's so interesting. Let me ask you this, because I just want to just drill down on this one thing, because sometimes the bullying, as you mentioned, it could be a parent that's bullying their own child. That's a very uncomfortable place for a child to be in. But what about this other aspect of workplace bullying? What do you do if the bully is an employee and they're being bullied by their boss or supervisor, the direct supervisor? What can you give any tips or potential solutions there?
Well, again, the hurt people are hurting people. It's difficult with adults because they often know they're doing it and they still do it anyway, for many reasons many of the same reasons they had when they were a child. And now also because it's now become force of habit. They don't know to stop it. They don't know how to stop it. I think figuring out ways to help that person, that bully, whether a roundabout way, but just have them seek personal growth. When I went through a tough spell in my life, I had friends of mine who put books in front of me and put knowledge in front of me, put seminars in front of me to help me grow and grow into a whole person. Spent a lot of time healing myself. You will find that most of those folks that bully in the office place or bully in the workplace struggle greatly at home, especially for adults. They don't know who the heck they are. Their self-esteem is shot. They've never taken the chance to actually work through issues, so therefore they still have not resolved those issues. Therefore, they're bringing those back into the workplace. If there's a supervisor above them and whatnot, then yes, they need to go try to work out that supervisor to see if they can get corrected. But a lot of it is understanding the bully for who they are and understanding the person that's being bullied, that person actually is understanding their personal self-worth and self-value. Spending time growing, knowing, learning, those things I think more than anything give understanding, they give perspective, and therefore they change our decision-making. If they change our decision-making, they change the actions we take and the results we get. So those are probably my thoughts on that.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephen. I want to thank you for being our featured guest today, and I know our audience has enjoyed you very, very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it big time.
We really enjoyed it. Stephen, you do so many great things, and listening to you talk about working, in the schools and the response of the children, it sounded so empowering when you had the bullies come up and tell their story. For those of our listeners who are interested, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing to heal the world?
Well, it's a big mission. We're going to try it one person at a time, but there's two ways. You can find us at StephenScoggins.com. When that's with a Stephen with a PH. And then we have a new website we're launching at the end of the month called the JourneyPrinciples.com. Journey Principles, that's actually JourneyPrinciples.com, where we're going to put a lot of resources up for bullying and whatnot. You can check with Debbie.Pipes. That's at JourneyPrinciples.com, who's my personal assistant for speaking and whatnot. And those are probably the biggest ways. But the easiest way is just to email us to the website. We can follow up accordingly.
Okay, thanks so much, Stephen. So listeners, to get in touch with Stephen, there are many different ways, but best go to his current main website, which is StephenScoggins.com. That's StephenScoggins. Thank you so much for being on the show, Stephen.
Thank you very much for having me again. God bless.
Yes, Stephen, thank you again. And I'd just like to ask, what final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
I think the biggest one is knowing they're not alone. They're not alone. All they need is information, and all they need to get the information is to search for it. All they need to get the help they need is to search for it. Don't be silent. Don't be alone. Talk to someone as quickly as possible.
Wow, that's really great, Stephen. I want to thank you for being our featured guest today, and I want to thank our audience so much for listening. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.